Good morning, everyone. We're going to go back in time and look at the precipitating factors to the current blockades, the Wet'suwet'en blockades. And while Financial Post was reporting on January 2nd, 2020, here we go. BC's Supreme Court rules for $6.6 billion coastal GasLink pipeline against Indigenous law. And this is hard to highlight for whatever reason. When I start highlighting it, the whole thing gets highlighted. So I apologize if it's a little bit disjointed. It's not meant to be. But anyway, here we go. Calgary. The Supreme Court of British Columbia has ruled that Indigenous law is not necessarily Canadian law in a decision that will enable more construction work on the $6.6 billion coastal GasLink pipeline, despite some First Nations opposition. BC Supreme Court Justice Margaret Church ruled Tuesday that coastal GasLink had suffered irreparable harm after protesters built blockades and camps to stop work crews from accessing parts of the natural gas pipeline route between Dawson Creek and Kitimat, BC, where a massive LNG export terminal is under construction. Church granted both an interlocutory injunction and an enforcement order, which will, quote, provide a mandate to the RCMP to enforce the terms of the order. The decision doesn't spell out what the RCMP can do to enforce the injunction, but police have been heavily scrutinized over the past year for enforcing a previous injunction granted by Justice Church against coastal GasLink protesters. Last January, RCMP officers enforcing an interim injunction order for coastal GasLink moved on a blockade, arrested protesters, and removed obstacles in what became a nationally televised confrontation. The case had showcased divisions with some First Nation communities where elected chiefs and hereditary chiefs sometimes jostle to enforce title rights of parts of traditional territories. In this case, Coastal GasLink has signed agreements with elected First Nations groups along the pipeline route, but a group of Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs have said they oppose the project and tried to use the First Nations law to prevent the company from building the pipeline. In her decision, Justice Church took issue with various First Nation groups and some hereditary chiefs, claiming that Indigenous laws give them legal rights to blockade crews trying to access the area. Quote, they submit that the plaintiff is in their traditional territory in violation of Wet'suwet'en law and authority, and their efforts in erecting the bridge blockade were to prevent violation of Wet'suwet'en law, Justice Church wrote. However, she also noted that Indigenous laws do not become part of Canadian common or domestic law until they are enshrined through treaties, court declarations, statutory provisions, or other means. Quote, there has been no process by which Wet'suwet'en customary laws have been recognized in this manner, the judge wrote. While Wet'suwet'en customary laws clearly exist on their own independent footing, they are not recognized as being an effectual part of Canadian law. However, the overlap between Canadian law and Indigenous law has not been completely settled, and courts across the country have had different opinions on the topic, says Dwight Newman, a law professor at the University of Saskatchewan and Canadian Research Chair in Indigenous Rights and Constitutional Law. Okay, I scroll down. In terms of this particular decision, the judge is also saying there wasn't a very good evidence in terms of what the Indigenous law was, Newman said, noting that the judge found multiple groups claiming rights over tracts of land amid conflicting claims of hereditary lineage. The group of opposed Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs released a statement saying they would reject the Supreme Court decision, which they said has criminalized their Indigenous laws. Okay, and I'm going to leave it there for the minute. Here is Justin Trudeau canceling his Caribbean Bahamas trip or Bermuda trip. Can't remember which one exactly, because of the protests. And this is the Toronto Sun tweeting, Trudeau cancels Caribbean trip amid anti-pipeline protests. And here's CTV News. This is 4:04 p.m. yesterday, February 16th. Today is the 17th. CTV News is reporting anti-pipeline protesters block international bridge in Niagara Falls in support of Wet'suwet'en. Can you imagine if any other group was blocking traffic in Niagara Falls to protest anything? Yellow vest groups or pro-oil group, anything that the current liberal people would disagree with. Do you think that they would be allowed to shut this down, even if they had 200 people? I think we'd see white supremacists arrested. I think that's the headline we'd see. Unbelievable. Anyway, here we go. 200 people stopped traffic at a Rainbow International Bridge in Niagara Falls on Sunday afternoon in protest of what they call a, quote, invasion of the Wet'suwet'en Nation due to the proposed pipeline in British Columbia. The demonstration started around 2 p.m. near Highway 420 and Stanley Avenue, at which point the protesters marched forwards marched towards the entrance to the bridge, effectively blocking traffic from traveling into the United States. Protesters held signs that said, "What about the next generation? Reconciliation is dead," and "Stand with the Wet'suwet'en." I'm going to scroll down. It's basically they were shutting down the traffic from going into the United States. They weren't shutting it down the other way. And this is talking about the railway blockades. Back to the article. Demonstrations have erupted across the country after Royal Canadian Mounted Police moved into the Wet'suwet'en territory and arrested pipeline protesters. A blockade near a rail line in Mohawk territory near Belleville was erected more than a week ago. The protest has caused significant disruption for travelers using Via Rail, and CN Rail has said they don't feel it safe to operate trains so close to the blockade. And so it's impacting supply lines, it's impacting travel, it's impacting the Prime Minister's trips. Here's something that I thought was odd. Remember last week, or maybe 3 or 4 days ago, when I showed you that Miss Freeland was being blocked from entering the BC legislature? On February 14th, this was fast-tracked through the courts. BC courts grants injunction to keep protesters from blocking legislature doors. So there's laws. Again, I say, if it was not people protesting this specific thing, I'm sure they'd be cleaned up and arrested good and quick. And well, we're going to make sure that our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed, and we're allowed to use the law to clean out these protesters, regardless of what they're protesting, because, you can't block the deputy PM like that, right? They'll respond good and quick. So this was fast-tracked through. Here it is. A BC Supreme Court judge has granted an injunction to arrest anyone blocking the doorways and preventing the everyday work of the BC legislature. Yeah, forget those dock workers in Vancouver. If you're blocking the BC legislature, though, man, you better get out of the way. We're going to arrest you. See these laws? You can't break these laws for these people. They're very special. But yeah, you can infringe on other people's right to go to work. That's fine, but not these people. That was me, by the way. Back to the article. BC Supreme Court Justice G.C. Wetherill ruled people are, quote, restrained from intimidating, molesting, or interfering with MLAs and staff. The injunction gives the Legislative Assembly, Protective Service, and/or Victoria Police the power to arrest anyone, arrest and remove any person with knowledge of the injunction. The police retain discretion as to the timing and manner of enforcement of this order, and specifically retain discretion as to the timing and manner of arrest and removal of any person pursuant to this order, reads the injunction. The order also gives police the power to detain and release any person without arrest they believe has broken the injunction. The judge's ruling prohibits blocking the 5 main doors of the legislature as well as the access points to the west and east annex buildings. The injunction comes after hundreds of protesters and demonstrators blocked the doors of the legislature on Tuesday. Many MLAs were turned away from entering the building, and some staff have gone to the Victoria Police to report being hurt while attempting to enter the building. I just want to underline that. You're trying to go to work. You try and enter a building, you get called names, so verbally abused, and then physically jostled or hit while trying to get into the building, and that person is not arrested for assault. Rule of law. We're a rule of law country. Unless if you're protesting something to do with a native band, regardless of whether you're actually part of that native band, you can be an anarchist following a website's direction to drive to Vancouver and join the protest because, yay, anarchy, right? But yeah, it doesn't matter who you actually are. It just matters who you say you are. We have to take that 100%, believe it, and behave as if you're not breaking the law. And then file a special court injunction to say, no, the laws actually do get enforced here. Here's a warning. And then enforce the law. I think that we should just be enforcing the law. This is insane. Back to the article. Premier John Horgan says there is a plan in place to prepare for expected protests at government buildings in Victoria on Friday. Quote, peaceful demonstration is fundamental to our success as a democracy, Horgan said to reporters on Wednesday after canceling a planned media availability on Tuesday. But to have a group of people say to others, you are illegitimate, you are not allowed in here, you are somehow a sellout to the values of Canadians is just plain wrong, and I want to underline that. It's funny because usually the left has no problem with that if they're name-calling people they disagree with, right? It's really interesting. Here's Justin Trudeau saying, tomorrow morning, this is a tweet, I'll convene an incident response group meeting with Mark Miller, Caroline Bennett, Mark Garneau, Bill Blair, Cara Freeland, Pablo Rodriguez, Bill Morneau, to address infrastructure disruptions across the country and discuss the path forward, details to follow. I mean, I really think that when the BC Supreme Court said, yeah, you can remove these people because they're breaking the law, you can just remove these people. They're breaking the law. It's ridiculous. The last story for this morning is 99 more cases of the coronavirus on the cruise ship. Now, a cruise ship is an especially virulent place to be, right? Like, you don't want to. If somebody's got a cold on the cruise ship, everybody's got a cold on the cruise ship, right? Like, it's gonna just happen. It is how people live, right? Especially when you're living that close quarters with people, and especially if it's airborne, which the coronavirus, COVID-19 is. So, I mean, interesting and not all that surprising. I'm going to show you the percentages in just a minute, but here's the report. Japanese officials have confirmed 99 more people infected by the coronavirus aboard the quarantined cruise ship Diamond Princess, bringing the total to 454. The health ministry said Monday. The ministry has been carrying out tests on passengers and crew of the ship docked in Yokohama, a port city near Tokyo. The 14-day quarantine for those on the ship was due to end Wednesday. Outside China, the ship has had the largest number of cases of the coronavirus caused by the virus that emerged in China late last year. The ministry said it has now tested 1,723 people on the Diamond Princess. The ship has about 3,700 passengers and crew. Okay, so I wanted to do the calculation. So if 454 people are sick, and the total number of the crew is 3,700, that's a percentage of 12%, right? 12.27%. But that's not how many people have been tested, so we don't even know that total yet. So we have to do this total, 454 of the tested total, 1,723, and that's 26%. So that's a very high infection rate. And that's I don't want to say that extrapolates over. I don't want to say that. And to date, I haven't heard of any deaths on the cruise ship. Maybe one. I think one death on the cruise ship, but I haven't heard of more deaths just on the cruise ship. But it's something to watch. It's a better indicator of the numbers than China, because China, well, a lot of people are talking about how China is massaging the numbers in a way that is just not possible. So those percentages are high, concerning. But, I mean, it's interesting. Watch, look, see what's happening, see what people are saying. There's nothing else you can do, right? Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com and CanadaReport.co, and enjoy your family day.